Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
What's going on today?
Sun is shining. I'm extremely sleepy, so I have those glasses on
That's
to
okay.
mask my red eyes. But yes, what's
Oh,
going on with you?
everything's good. We just, International Jazz Day was quite a day. The Count
Right.
Basie Orchestra came to Kansas City, and
Amazing.
it was awesome. Like, it just was like, um, Lonnie McFadden, who actually runs the Reno Club, was where Count Basie started. So there was
Oh gosh.
all these historical underpinnings. And then at one point, Scotty Barnhart, the director, was like, "This is where it all began, and we're back." And it was like awesome, just
It's
totally cool.
amazing. Well,
Yes.
I had an amazing International Jazz Day with Mr. International Jazz himself. Mr. Wycliffe Gordon had a concert in Aaron Davis Hall in New York City in Harlem,
Oh, cool.
and it assembled international jazz group, which is his Wycliffe Gordon, his international all stars from Australia, Japan, Israel, United States of America, and he invited me to sing a couple songs. So it was quite a night. So I was very excited to be there for that.
Very cool. Well, and there's more excitement with the new album. So
Yeah,
thank you for reaching out. I love the cover. It fits the whole theme of
yeah.
Night of the Movies. So
Mhm.
before we get into it, I want to know one of the things that kind of still reverberates into our lives is this
Yeah,
whole living through a pandemic. And 5 years ago, we were knee deep trying to figure it out. And I know
yeah.
personally, I was interviewing more musicians than ever. So it's so nice to be able to catch up with everyone now that we're like out
Yes,
and there's
you and I
albums.
spoke actually. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So
Yeah.
ultimately, now coming out of it, how much of living through that has changed the way that you approach life or the way that you approach being a musician?
I think it opened up a lot of opportunities with regards to collaborating with people remotely. I think it was part of musicians' lives outside of jazz genre. People collaborated, swap tracks, and overdub things like this, since the technology was available.
Yeah,
But jazz genre only adopted that wholeheartedly,
yeah.
during the pandemic. There are albums that won Grammys in jazz genre that were fully remotely recorded. So, in fact, my next album, I am thinking of doing like a remote, large scale band collaboration, which is both economic decision for me to assemble a symphonic orchestra in New York. I could probably record 3 bars and
Yeah.
go home. But pandemic allowed and opened up our minds to that this music can be produced in a high quality. And actually, it connects to this album as well, because during the pandemic, as we were all sitting on our little computers, AKA phones, um, I discovered a lot of new artists. And some of those artists are collaborators on this recording as well. So, a lot of things were difficult, but a lot more imagination and new ways of working opened up, I feel. So,
Sometimes when I dig back into that time period and think about the conversations I had, I always remember thinking if there was a group of artists that this time was made for, it's jazz musicians. Because you're already getting thrown into the unknown. Everything's improv. There's no
yeah,
script. And that's
yeah,
exactly what this time period was all about. So there's
that's
no
right.
surprise that there was this mobility and adaptability to a time period that is indicative of every time you climb on stage, you know?
100%. And in fact, another thing for me personally was creating the program of jazz appreciation. I would call it more so than direct jazz education. That's called Swing Makes You Sing. And we were able to translate this program from virtual format then to in-person format. And that's one of the things I'm touring now. It became a fruitful avenue for performance and creativity, and I'm working on the album for that as well. So for sure.
You know what's interesting about the theme of movies on your album is that the one thing that was very strange about that time was that Disney movie Sing came out. Remember?
Yes.
And it was
Yeah,
like the one time that people could get fired up to go see live music. It was the one time that no
that's
one
fun.
could go see it. So you have this guy that's in New York getting everybody fueled up to go see live jazz, but no one could do it. It's just kind of the, I don't know. I don't know what that means. I don't know how you read between those lines, but it's weird.
This is how I would read it.
Okay.
Created the propelled this momentum and this desire and wish. So once things opened up, um, I'm not a jazz club owner, and I know it is very hard to run a jazz club. In fact, there's a tremendous, I would say one of the best in the world, jazz clubs in where I live in upstate New York that is closing its doors. So it's
Wow.
very, 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 very hard. However, I've seen such a booming and exploding after the pandemic in terms of opening new venues, in terms of things being completely packed to get into, Smalls, Mesro, Arthur's Tavern, which is a club I perform at regularly. You have to stand in line around the corner. And again, I'm not neglecting that it is still extraordinarily difficult to run financially, to run this business, but I think a movie like this, along with all the music we have been seeing and just being indoors, created this, concealed desire that exploded post-pandemic. That's how I look at it. But
Yeah. I,
who knows?
I agree. And I think that it's kind of like having a slingshot, like everything just more
Exactly.
attention. You know, the interesting thing, it's interesting you say that because I was I we didn't know what was going to happen with clubs in Kansas City. And one specific club that sticks out to me is the great John Scott runs the Green Lady Lounge in the Black Dolphin, and it's one of the beacons here in Kansas City. And they stayed open and they adapted and they're thriving more than ever. And I
Right.
just I think there's a lot of kudos for the Kansas City area. I don't think anything closed. In fact, I think this is the weird thing. Lonnie McFadden, who introduced the Count Basie Orchestra last night, he actually opened up his club in 2020, and
Oh, wow.
he's amazing. Like, I mean, you get he is that old world. He's that bridge between the old and modern world. Like, I went and saw a show. My wife got us tickets for an anniversary, and it was just like he's unbelievable. Like, he is literally one of the best performers I've ever seen in my life. It's like
Wow.
on par with like I remember seeing Arturo Sandoval when he came to Kansas City, and I'd never seen a show like that. I don't think I'd ever seen an encore for a concert until he came. And he had this bedside manner. He was like a comedian, kind of ribbing the people in the front row and just being playful with everybody. He just had such a
Yeah.
buoyancy to him. So it was cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think, again, technology meets real world. A lot of clubs live stream shows now.
Yeah.
I think it raises a lot of ethical concerns. In fact, we were discussing it with the band yesterday. Then what do you do with that? Is it live streamed and having access to the performance as you perform? Or does the club then puts it out on YouTube, tries to make a recording with it, and what kind of ethical issues it raises in terms of ownership of music, in terms of royalties,
Yep.
in terms of, look, the energy of a live performance is that sometimes you make a mistake and you recover and the audience soars with you like in a circus, in a
Yep.
best possible way. Do I want this to live forever on the internet? I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting dilemma, but to be determined what's going to happen.
Absolutely. So this new album is like a reimagined level of what you've done before. So talk to me
Yeah.
about why you decided to do this and how
Mhm.
good does it feel that this project has come to
Oh,
fruition and it's real?
thank you for asking that question in that specific way.
Yeah.
So look, I've always been very interested in electronic music and different, the technology is there and imagination is your only limitation. I've taken electronic music classes when I was in my graduate school at Manhattan School of Music, which were probably some of the most creative classes where only your imagination was your limit and your guide. And so during the pandemic, I got to listening a lot more current artists that were making this music and reading up about different artists, from completely avant-garde to, our contemporaries. And I've discovered folks who were just sitting at home and throwing out little vignettes, you know, um, someone like Amber Navran, who then ended up, being nominated for Grammy with her project. And what I wanted for this project in particular, which was released right before the pandemic, is kind of pay tribute to how we all survived reimagining things, right? So there's a little bit of an Easter egg in that. Really, we did survive, like you said, making things up, redoing things, but also to kind of open up this new idea of a sound for myself. Um, so I've approached people in particular for this, who I also believe are amazing jazz musicians. So everyone on this recording, Amber Navran, she's a jazz vocalist. She's first a reed player, and then also a keyboard player and songwriter and synth player, right? Melanie Charles, who remixed Moonlight. She is a vocalist and a flautist and a producer as well. Sirintip, she was someone I met through Manhattan School of Music. Tipan, she's an incredible vocalist, an incredible jazz vocalist. She was in different competitions, but her music is more on the edge of production and pop and kind of new sound. Cheryl Engelhardt, I met through Grammy Networks, and she was nominated for New Age chant music. And I thought, is there one song that I can collaborate with her on that would have that sound? And there was Young and Beautiful, which is a song, a bonus track to my movie album that I released during the pandemic, in fact, from Great Gatsby, that, we together kind of spoke about the script, like, what is this reimagining going to be about? And it was reimagined like a magical forest, a walk in the forest. Then Anne Elise, I didn't know her before, actually. And what happened was I had 3 or 4 producers on my list, and then I realized that 4 of them are women. And I said, you know what? Let me go with the idea of creating a remix album that is all women artists, because part of it too is that there's not a ton, comparatively speaking, of women artists, producers, who actually also fit this idea of being stellar musicians as well. They're at least the majority of producers are men. So I asked, hey, I have this one more poppy kind of jumpy art track, and someone introduced me to Annie. And then of course, Bryn Bliska, who she was she wouldn't mind me saying, but she's the reason that this took much longer, because I was really sad on wanting her to be part of it. And she's just an incredible person, and she's mainly a side person to folks like Jacob Collier and to a lot of like pop acts as well. But she was putting out those little vignettes during the pandemic, and I just got fully enthralled with her sound and imagination. And so it was very special that she was one of the folks who did a remix. So to me, it's both a little side project nugget, and I appreciate you being so open-minded about it. You mainly have folks who do, traditional modern or traditional vocal or instrumental jazz things, and that you opened your mind like a jazz musician or appreciator would, and said, okay, I understand this is something new and different, but also to me, it paves a path to including this kind of sounds in my future projects. So I'm very excited for it to be out. And it took a long time. It took pretty much since the beginning of the pandemic. I was pursuing specific people. I wanted it to be just right. And some of them I've never met in person. So kudos, pandemic. Thank you for
Yes,
showing the
absolutely.
way.
Well, the one thing and I love electronica. I mean, it's right up there
There
with
you go.
for me. It's like Moby and all of those kinds of minds that make electronica. I love, and I think that's what I noticed when the pandemic was going was there was a lot of musicians out there that were blending these different elements. I mean, it's kind of the Miles Davis mindset. I mean, he didn't
Yes.
stay in acoustic. he moved with the times, and that was really indicative. In fact, it's interesting. I just watched a documentary on Clive Davis about his prowess and how he got into the industry. And at one point,
Interesting.
yeah, so at one point, so he was close with Miles. Miles came in and was just furious and said, "All these people are ripping me off."
That's interesting.
So Clive said, "Why don't you come up with, you're Miles Davis. Why don't you come up with something?" That's when he really embarked hardcore on Bitches Brew. That was when that album came out, and that was
Mhm.
when that new horizon of electronica started kind of becoming his,
Interesting.
new thing. So there's always a backstory. It's interesting. I always am convinced that every news item we get, we know about 5 to 10% of it, and it's
Oh,
not
for sure. It's
right.
the
And
iceberg idea. We see the tip of it.
that's it.
Yeah,
That's it.
no, for sure. And the idea of Miles taking on this kind of ideas when he was already so successful and kind of like could just rest at the laurels of
Uh-huh.
his labor for he was a never resting artist. He just
Right.
wanted to keep doing stuff and it's inspiring and to be honest with you too, and maybe that's getting a little deeper than you wish, but look, the world is a tough place now, and it became tougher during the pandemic. So, part of my mission on stage and with this to just put more things that I think are beautiful in the world. And hopefully, I've been sending it to radio stations, and some are like, well, absolutely not. We play, traditional jazz only. But others are saying, oh my God, this is just absolutely beautiful. And I want this to be part of people's playlists for them to enjoy.
No, I love this depth, and I've been asking about these weird times in 2025. I mean, it's like America has become kind of this aggressor, and people are afraid, and there's just not a comfort that we're used to having. And I think that music and the arts are going to be a bastion for everybody to feel a little bit more connected and a little bit more like, yeah, we're going to get through this because I think
Yeah,
this is a temporary stop on the tram, and we're going to get to somewhere better, but it's up to us to grab onto the light and then to make the light and all of those things that come into it. And I think what you're doing with this reimagined project and blending new elements is you're just evolving as an artist. And we have to evolve as human beings to that next step to get through what we're going through right now. So
yeah.
it's a good thing. So if anybody wants to pick up the album, if they want to catch you live, anything else that's going on, where can they do that?
Well, this is a purely recording project, so I'm not performing it live, but it is out there on all streaming platforms right now. So you can find me, Svetlana. The album is called Real to Remix, Night at the Movies Reimagined. I am considering making a vinyl because it's actually very kind of became a thing that people are asking for. So I will have to rest a little bit financially from putting it out, but that's what I want to do. But folks can enjoy it. And I'm going on tour always. I'm going to be in Florida in a couple of weeks, going in different spots. I'm going to be at Regatta Bar in June. I'm going to be all over New York City doing different summer outdoor things during the summer. And then I'm going to Alaska in August. So, always out there, always on the road. North Carolina, South Carolina in September, October, then Florida again later in the year in December. So let's meet. Maybe I'll have a vinyl by then, but for now, keep streaming it. Keep enjoying the music that was made for you, that was made for you.
So have you been to Alaska before?
No, I am
That's so
so
cool.
excited.
Yeah.
Well, I have to give shout out to South Arts, which is a grant program supported by Andrew Mellon Foundation and Doris Duke Charitable Trust. And they send artists, they give us a little bit of money and send us, the mission is exactly like this album, is to bring music and sound to where it's not been before. How jazz of is it? And so I thought, okay, let me put together a tour and you have to apply and there's a panel, it's very competitive, but where can I go that I can absolutely not afford to go by myself with a six-piece band? It's really far. And I thought, Alaska is the furthest. Let's go.
Yes.
And we're going to little art councils. We're going to schools where we're hoping to bring this music that the 6-piece New York City-based band does not necessarily have an opportunity to be seen in this context. So we're very excited, very excited.
You know, it's amazing. I think my wife taught fifth grade for a long time, and she would always put jazz on, and the kids would just start tapping and getting into it, and
Yes.
and just feeling something they never heard before. And I think that's the beauty of this art form is that the one thing about jazz is that it presents this opportunity because it's kind of on the fringe to become something that can hook people in, and
Exactly.
and I mean it's kind of like hearing Kind of Blue the first time. It's like, what's this strange music that I've never heard before,
I know. And look, this is something that I'm experiencing firsthand with this kids program that I have, Swing Makes You Sing. And again, album is on the way, but sometimes schools or theaters who have educational outreach programming are reluctant to bring us because they think of jazz as more outdated. But I can't, proof is in the pudding. I have a collection of reactions from, presenters and adults themselves to kids who are on their feet, tapping, dancing with us, and are again being able to be taken out from their classrooms, which it's very telling. We write a blues song with them and we ask them, how are you feeling today?
Yeah.
And we were just in a high school in Utah. And every answer was, can you guess the feeling? What do you think they answered? One word.
Yeah, totally.
Anxious.
Yeah.
Anxious was the answer throughout all these kids.
Uh-huh.
We made 6 or 7 presentations. The kids' answer was anxious. And to be able to teach them that you can take this feeling, anxious because of school, anxious because of in time, anxious because maybe I live in a closed community that does not accept who I am, and taking it and channeling it with arts versus all the other ways that unfortunately are available to them. So I think it's an important thing for us to bring to the kids. And once again, I can't wait to be in Alaska and do that.
Yeah, it's going to be wonderful. Well, it's so great to catch up. Thank you so much for reaching out.
Thank you.
This has been wonderful, and best of luck with all the adventures and the album
Yes.
release, and hopefully we catch up down the line.
Thank you so much for supporting the music. I've known you for years now. We've done it a few times.
Yes.
I'm always a fan of listening to interviews of other artists. So thank you and see you on the airwaves, as they say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sounds wonderful.
Jazz fans, Joe Domino here, the host of the weekly Neon Jazz radio show and regular interview series being produced and distributed from Lee Summit, Missouri. We are very excited to let you know about the second annual Lee Summit Jazz Festival taking place again this summer on June 28th at the Bridge Space, located at 210 Southwest Market Street in downtown Lee Summit. Following the success of the 2024 festival, the lineup will include Lee Summit students, Casey Area Youth Jazz, Paganova with Michael Pagan, Horoscope with Stan Kessler, Brad Gregory, Adam Larson, and the Lee Summit Jazz Orchestra. There will also be food trucks and vendors to round out a day of celebration. Early bird tickets are 2 for $30, and all details can be found at lsjazzfest.com. We can't wait to see you there.